Vanessa Ivy. My husband chose her name because he wanted her initials to be VIP.
Welcome to Still a Part of Us, a podcast where moms and dads share the story of their child who was stillborn or who died in infancy. I'm Winter Red, and on this episode, Kaitlyn is telling the story of her daughter, Vanessa, who was stillborn at 37 weeks and 6 days due to a placental abruption. As a word of caution to our listeners, this story contains emotional triggers of stillbirth and infant loss. Please keep yourself emotionally and mentally healthy and seek help if needed. Also, be aware that these stories may differ from his or her partners, as these accounts are told from their own perspective through the lens of trauma, heartache, and the passage of time. Please respect our moms and dads who are brave and gracious to share their children with us. Kaitlyn, thank you so much for coming on today and talking about your sweet daughter, Vanessa. Thank you so much. And we are excited to hear more about her. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, well, thank you for having me, Winter. It's super exciting to be here. I've been very compelled to share Vanessa's story, and I'm happy that you have created an avenue that women like me or fathers like my husband can share. A little bit about me. I live in Charleston, South Carolina, and I've originally born in California. So, kind of moved 3,000 miles apart.
Yeah, really.
I've been here for about 4 years now. And essentially the last 4 years of my life have really just been super fast paced, from moving here to getting a new job to buying and selling a house and buying land, building a house and moving in and moving into an apartment. I mean, it's been pretty crazy.
Yeah.
So right now I'm currently a full-time college student. I was in hospitality before when I was pregnant with Vanessa, but I'm going into radiology. I would like to be a sonographer.
Oh,
So
really?
that I wanted to work with in like an OB office or something like that. And I just thought it would be super fun. I like being hands-on, and I like to meet people. I just realized in the hospitality industry, I I don't want to meet people and just like bow to their every need.
That's, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I was just like, I like people, but I don't like this side of people.
Yeah, I know. It's tricky. It's tricky for sure.
Yeah.
That is really interesting. So did you decide to do that? How long ago did you decide
To move.
to start studying to become a sonographer?
Oh, start studying. This happened probably a little over a year ago. My husband was like, you should maybe think about going back to college. And I said, I really don't know what I want to do. Like, a lot of my friends are always all about the nursing or all about the vet tech. And I was like, yeah, they sound fun, but
Nothing was
I'll be
clicking.
very honest, when it comes down to the stress of the job, I was like, I don't think I can really handle that. More power to them for being able to respond in those kind of emergency situations. But my kid gets a scrape on his knee and I'm freaking out.
Yeah.
So I don't know how I'd react if someone else had a bigger boo-boo. So I was like, maybe being like a medical diagnostic sonographer would be fun.
Yeah.
Whether I do work in an OB office, which is what I hope to do, or maybe I'm just the tech in the hospital and I just go and take pictures and send it to the doctor.
Yeah.
It's something that I get to kind of meet with people and, maybe put them at ease while I'm doing the ultrasound and everything. And, just kind of make that small little connection, because during the pregnancy with my son, during the pregnancy with Vanessa, I remember the techs and how sweet they were.
Yeah.
And how comfortable they made me feel.
Yeah.
So I was like, I want that.
Cool.
I want to.
You're like, I want to be that.
Yeah.
That's really cool. And then tell me a little bit about your family, because it sounds like you got your husband and you guys have been married for a while now. Did you guys meet in California or?
So we met through a mutual friend. I was still living in California and he was in South Carolina. And the best way I like to describe it, as we talked for 9 months before we actually physically met.
Oh.
When we physically met, we were like, okay, cool. But when I finally moved to South Carolina because I applied for a job at a hotel, I like to say that he realized I was irresistible.
I love it.
And he just, he wanted to, and we started dating since then. We've been married 2 or 3 years now. Oh, everything's been, I can't remember the year. So 2 years now, I think.
That's great.
But yeah, so we're kind of like two peas in a pod.
Good.
I've never met anyone that compliments me more personality wise than he does. And it's a really awesome feeling.
That is awesome. And then you also have a son, is that right?
Yes, I have a 5-year-old. He just turned 5. His name is Harrison.
Awesome.
And he drives me crazy every day, but I love him.
Sounds like my daughter.
Yeah. But he's in pre-K, and the teacher has been working with him a lot. He's above average, excelling in learning his letters and sounds. And, hopefully he'll start to learn how to read by the end of the year. And there's just so many things that, that he does that just truly amaze me, seeing him grow.
Yeah.
And seeing him change in his little personality.
Yeah.
So it's been a lot of fun.
Isn't that fun there's little kids are fun. I think my daughter's 5 as well. She just barely turned 5. And so it's fun to see that age that is so into everything and super creative. And I love it. So, and any fun hobbies that you guys have that you guys like doing as a family or as yourself?
So, as a family, we're the kind of video game nerds.
We
love
you are?
To play video games together. Yeah. For example, my husband downloaded Classic Doom on his PS4 and we're able to play 3 players on it.
Nice.
So yeah, it's a lot of fun to be able to do. We have Harrison join us, and he does pretty good. It's stuff that we did at his age. So figured why not? I love horseback riding.
Oh.
My mother-in-law has 2 horses, Munchkin and Samson, and they're both draft horses, so they're big babies.
Wow.
Yeah, I like to go up there and ride them and to just kind of be out at the farm because I don't have cell service there, so no one can really bug me.
Yes.
So it's kind of freeing.
Yeah.
My husband, he's mainly kind of, he likes to kind of binge watch shows, and I like to binge watch with him. We watch the typical like Rick and Morty and South Park and things like that. But usually when we're, in bed at night. So
that's funny.
But yeah, as a family, we like to try, and every Tuesday we go to this Stars and Strikes place where we live, and they have an unlimited game night for like $10.99.
Oh.
So we just pay for a card, and you go to an arcade and you just play as much as you want. You don't get tickets.
Yeah.
But you get to play as much as you want. I'm like, well, that's all I want to do. I just want to play the
You're
games.
like, I don't need the tickets. I don't need the little cheap prize.
Yeah, exactly. I don't need to work up to 60,000 tickets for something that costs $6.
Yeah, exactly.
Something that's going to break in 24 hours. So I'll be good with that.
It sounds like you guys like to have fun together and play games. I think that's really cool.
Yeah, we definitely do.
Okay.
We like to try and make the best of things.
Yeah, totally. And just a little bit of context. How long ago was Vanessa born?
It has been 4 months and 1 week approximately since this recording.
At this recording. So yeah. And by the time this comes out, it'll be a couple more months after that. But so it's actually fairly recent for you.
Yeah, it is very recent. It's definitely some days I get up and I remember the fact that I was like, oh, like I was actually pregnant last year, and this actually happened, actually on the 9th of February, I have it in my calendar on my phone, and that's when I found out I was pregnant with Vanessa last year.
Really?
So I saw that, and, that made me really sad. And because I remember how excited I was when I told my husband I was finally pregnant with her.
Yeah.
Because it was something that was so sudden. We weren't expecting it. We were expecting maybe a couple months, but it was a one try. And
was it? Okay.
So, I remember how excited Harrison was to, run up to him with the clear blue test that had the words pregnant on it. So my husband couldn't say, oh, well, the line isn't right there. So
You're like, I can read it right here.
yeah, it's English.
So you guys you didn't have any fertility issues, and it sounded like you were just starting to try then. So it really
Yeah.
was pretty easy then.
Yeah, it really was. We weren't expecting to get pregnant so fast, just due to some medications, but it was one of those that everything kind of fell into place at the right
Mm-hmm.
moment and at the right time. And the timing of it, we always say the timing of it was so perfect.
Yeah.
We and it's funny because we had just signed the week prior, signed the construction loan for our house to be built. And then a week later, I found out I was pregnant with her. And so my husband called the contractor and was like, I know you said that building the house takes 8 to 9 months, but we don't really have that time. If you could, is there any way you can get it done sooner? And he's like, I can't guarantee it because of certain delays and contractors, but
Yeah.
we're actually able to get into our house. And so from January, we got in July.
Oh, great. That's
Yeah.
great.
So it's perfect timing.
Yeah, it really was. Wow. That really was good for timing.
Yeah. And I was like, oh, thank goodness.
Yeah, you do not want to be worrying about moving while having a
Moving,
baby.
having a baby.
Yeah.
And yeah, I just told my husband, I was like, I really, really hope that I don't have to worry about that.
Yeah.
That was my biggest worry for last year, really.
Mm-hmm. And how did your pregnancy go? Tell me about that and how you were feeling and all that jazz.
Yeah. So the pregnancy was, I mean, smooth as glass. I didn't have any kind of complications or anything in the beginning. Before I had found out I was pregnant, I remember I was sitting down and I was like, why do I feel so sick? I'm just sitting here. I was like, maybe I'm just really hungry. But then I would go cook and I was like, no, like the smell of any kind of meat made me ill.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was like, let me take a test. So I found out I was pregnant. All during the pregnancy, it's almost kind of like some people say, oh, that's kind of cool. And for me, it's kind of on the edge, but I didn't actually really start showing until I was almost in my third trimester.
Oh, really?
She just carried really like in my hips and towards my back.
Oh.
So, I kind of started getting around a tummy probably after 25 weeks.
Okay.
But I would just lay there and, I'd have a flat stomach and you just see it move. And I was like, this is so weird.
It's so weird.
So, yeah. But, towards the end and everything, my clothes stopped fitting. And I was like, honey, I regret this. Why? And, but I was just so excited to have the bump because I loved being able to rub her and feel her butt poke out or feel her feet or something kick. And that was my favorite part of the pregnancy, just period. The only thing I didn't like towards the end was with her and with my son, their heads would push so far down into my pelvic area that it felt like one of my legs would pop out. It was the worst feeling in the world. And I couldn't walk if they did it. So I'd be coming from the gym, doing my 30 minutes of cardio. And all of a sudden, that happens. And I'm in the middle of the gym going, and everyone's like, what's going on? And it doesn't help that I'm a pregnant woman standing there and screaming and saying, I'm in pain. And so everyone's like, are you in labor? I said, no, I'm not. And my child's just, trying to make my leg fall off.
You're freaking everybody out in the gym.
I was. I definitely was. I freaked my husband out a couple times.
Did you?
Oh, but I mean, it is what it is.
Yeah. When you found out, did you guys find out if it was going to be a girl or a boy?
So at our 12-week scan, so the first trimester scan, one of the techs in there, my husband was just so anxious to find out if we were having a girl or a boy.
Yeah.
And he asked him, was like, can you tell? And she was like, oh, I can maybe kind of see. And she looked and she was like, you know what? I would put money on it that it's going to be a girl. And so, of course, she's like, but you never know what could happen. It could change. And so my husband, of course, tells everyone. And I told him, I said, honey, we should probably wait till 16 weeks, because we had
Mm-hmm.
the See Me 3D done with her,
Oh, uh-huh.
where we had 2 sessions of 3D scans so you could see her grow and, get little face shots and everything, which was really fun. And and at the 16-week one, we did a Facebook Live thing for the
Mm-hmm.
official reveal. And she put it on there. So the text said, "There she is," and we're like, "It's a girl!" So we
Ah!
were super excited. Yeah, I was really, my husband was excited because ever since we got together, he said he's always wanted a little girl. He's
Really?
always wanted to have those cute little pink dresses, or like at Christmas time, have the little Santa Mrs. Claus dresses and things like that. And he's just, every time we'd go by the girls section, he'd be like, honey, look how cute it all is.
Yep, the girl stuff is definitely cuter.
It really is.
That is so
And
sweet.
there's so much of it. So,
Yeah.
you know, having her, it really felt like she just completed our family.
Yeah.
Everything that we wanted and everything that, we thought we needed.
Yeah.
So it was, the loss of her is definitely, from how fast paced our lives were. I mean, we would always joke about, man, is it ever going to stop? But I didn't realize how sudden that stop would be when we found out that she had passed.
Ugh. Can you go into when you found out? When did
Yeah.
that? What week were you? And yeah, tell us a little bit more
So
about that.
yeah, so I was like 37 weeks and 5 days.
Mm-hmm.
It was October 5th when I went to a fire prevention kind of fair that my husband had a booth at, and I take my son there because he loves the fire trucks and loves seeing his daddy and hanging out with his daddy and doing everything. And I went there and, walking around all day. My back was killing me, but again, I'm almost 38 weeks pregnant
Mm-hmm.
and my feet were swollen. I was like, okay, honey, we need to go home. My husband had left to go to drill in Walterboro, which is about an hour away. And I also wanted to leave because my husband's birthday is on October 7th.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to plan a surprise birthday party for him the next day.
Gotcha.
So one of his senior command is one of our friends, and I convinced him to have him stay the night so I could have the whole house ready the
Oh,
next day. And when he
nice.
came home, I'd have a house full of people. I was going to make chili and everything. So I drove home. Drove to the store, got everything, and when I finally got home, put the chili together, made my son some chicken nuggets and fries. I sat down with him to eat, and by this time it was, I want to say about 3:45, 4 o'clock, and I sat down on the couch because I'd been walking around all day. I
Mm-hmm.
kind of felt her move a little bit. And I was like, if I'm walking, she's not kicking a lot. It's never been that way. I've
Mm.
never been walking around and she's going crazy. Normally, the minute I sit down, she goes nuts.
Mm.
But when I sat down, nothing happened. And I was like, that's a little odd. So I poked her and I felt myself move her side to side. And I kind of sat there waiting and she never kicked back. Um, and so at that point, I felt my heart start to thump, and start beating faster. I went and got some juice, I drank like an entire glass of juice,
Mm-hmm.
laid on my side, and I put my hand on my belly. And I sat there and I waited for, I think it maybe 5 or 10 minutes. To me, it felt like an eternity, but it really wasn't that long. Um, and she still didn't kick.
Mm.
And so that's when I knew something was wrong. Um, and it's just me and Harrison at home. And, my husband's an hour away. And so I texted him, I said, hey, I think I need to go to the hospital because I haven't felt Vanessa kick since this morning, but I'm sure she's fine. Maybe she's just kind of giving me a scare or something.
Mm-hmm.
So at that point, I kind of got up, I came into my bedroom, and I'm trying to do my best to not freak out because the only thing I can think in my head is my baby's dead. Something's wrong with her, or what's going on. And I remember talking to her and saying, Vanessa, like, I just need you to kick. and I need you to do it 10 times and then we'll be fine. And it never happened. So then I called the hospital. I told them what happened, and they said, well, go ahead and come down. We'll get you checked out just to ease your mind. And not to mention, you'll get to see the labor and delivery ward for when it's time to deliver. I said, okay, great. So I called one of my friends, Melissa, and I told her, hey, haven't felt Vanessa kick and I need to go to the hospital. Can you watch Harrison? And she immediately said, come over.
Mm-hmm.
And, the time I'm on the phone with her, I knew I was trying so hard not to cry or sound panicked. And before I knew it, I was getting in the truck. But then I remembered I had left something in the house. What it was, I have no idea. But I went back in and I'm in the mud room and I could have swore I felt her kick. And my heart stopped and I stopped and I said, Vanessa, I need you to do it again. I need you to kick me. And it didn't happen. And I just burst into tears. I grabbed whatever I needed. I calmed myself down. I came back out. And before I knew it, I was at my friend Melissa's house. Dropped Harrison off. I gave her a quick hug bye and I, sped off to the hospital. And the whole time I remember telling her, I said, Vanessa, I need you to kick. You're scaring mommy. I need to know you're okay. And, nothing had happened. And it was about a 35-minute drive to the hospital for me. So the whole time I'm kind of going crazy. I finally get to the hospital. I park the truck and I go up to labor and delivery. And, they have me sign that little tiny form. And I remember trying to be perky because I didn't want to be that crazy lady coming in. And so they took me into the back and one of the nurses came back and they have those big Dopplers,
Mm-hmm.
She put it, and she puts a gel on it and the speaker's super loud, like in my ear. And I was like, oh God, that's really loud. And she put it on my belly in 4 or 5 different spots and it was so quiet. And I was like, why is there no heartbeat? And she was all, well, let me get the ultrasound machine because sometimes it's difficult to find the heartbeat with these. And that was kind of hard for me to believe because 5 days prior at my doctor's appointment, it took her 2 seconds to find it, Not to mention, like, I'm 38 weeks. Where's my baby going to go? Like, it's not 12 weeks where, she can just kind of swim away. So the doctor came in and she started the ultrasound. And because I had so many ultrasounds done, whether it was, doctors doing the anatomy scans, they had ordered one more extra just because they thought she was a little small, but she grew in size. So they were like, okay, she's fine. I've seen them do the blood flow, for the kidneys and everything like that. I saw it on my 3D elective one. And I remember she was looking at the placenta and I could see the blood flow in the cord, but I didn't see it anywhere else. And I thought that was very strange. And not to mention, my baby's not moving on the screen.
Yeah.
She's not even twitching. And then she puts it over her head and her upper body, and she points at the screen and said, this is where the heartbeat should be. And I remember screaming, no, what do you mean? I just got her room ready. I'm 2 weeks away from my due date. What do you mean she's dead? And they're like, I'm so sorry. Do you want another doctor to confirm this? I said, go get that other doctor because I refuse to believe my baby's dead. I remember looking at my belly and saying, Vanessa, I need you to move. Like, stop doing this. And the emotion that I felt was just numb. I couldn't feel any extremes or anything. It was just such a shock. And I could feel the adrenaline running through me. And the second doctor came in and confirmed it. And I lost it at that point. I was like, I don't even know what I'm supposed to do at this point. They're like, we can call your husband for you and, we'll get you into a room.
they said, do you want us to call your husband? And I said, and in the first instance, I was like, yeah, go ahead and call him. But I was like, wait a minute, no, I need to call him.
Mm-hmm.
I need to talk to him. So I called him, and he answered, and it took I think it took me like a full minute before I could actually tell him that I lost the baby, because it was so hard to say those words to him. I remember, the pain in his voice and him saying, I'm on my way. Thankfully, he left from Walterboro and came down, and when they escorted me from the room where they told me her heartbeat was no longer there to the other room, I remember seeing through my blurry vision of tears another mom and dad walking the hall in labor. And I remember thinking, that should be me right now. I shouldn't be crying, or my baby should be alive. I should be anticipating her arrival. I remember they put me in the room, and I remember just how dark and empty it felt. Half the lights were off, and even though there was the bed and all the chairs and the machines, it just felt so empty. And the emptiness just really reflected my soul at that point. I remember them asking me, do you want us to stay with you? Do you want to be alone? And I said, I don't know. I said, maybe I just need to be alone right now. And they laughed, and I immediately regretted my decision, and I asked someone to come back. And, my husband had came in, and behind him was Vanessa's godmother that also came in. And she was coming back from drill as well, because she's in the National Guard from Myrtle Beach. And somehow, in some way, they both got to the hospital at the same time, even though they're both minimum an hour away. I remember embracing my husband and just feeling the pain of him not having his little girl, me not having our little girl, and her never being able to see anything of the world. And it broke my heart. I was like, how is this even a thing? I didn't know that stillbirths could happen to someone who had no medical history of anything. I mean, I had my son, everything went fine, and then I have my daughter, and we don't even know what happened. I remember that he told me he had already called Joe and Melissa, who are watching Harrison. I remember asking them if they could go to the house, because I had left the house unlocked, and I just said, can you go and take care of the dogs? Because I was like, I can't leave them in their cages for, I don't even know how long I'm going to be here. And he said he called his mom and dad, and they were on their way, and they were an hour away too. And he was like, have you called your mom? And I didn't even think of that. Because who thinks to call their mom and tell them their grandbaby died? So I remember calling her. And my mom always answers the phone the same way. And she said, hi, baby. Really excited because, that's just my mom. And it made me cry even more. And she said, Kaitlyn, what's wrong? And I told her, I said, Mom, Vanessa died. I lost the baby. And the heartbreak that you hear, or that I heard from her, was something I don't think any child should hear from their mom. And she was like, what do you mean? I was like, she's dead. Like, they just told me. And, she was like, okay, well, I can't remember most of the conversation, but I remember at the end, she told me, I'll keep up with you every hour. Don't worry about calling anyone else. I'll tell them. And I was so grateful that she did that, because I don't know how I would have been able to call my sister, my grandmother, my brother, or anyone else to tell them that I had lost Vanessa so close to our due date. And I remember, after that, I know they had to kind of start my IVs and take blood samples and, do all that stuff. And while they were doing it, I remember thinking, am I going to die? Like, if my baby's dead, does that mean I'm going to die too? And I had this insane feeling that, oh, death is just coming for me now. And why, I don't know, but I guess my brain just kind of rationalized it as, well, clearly my body is failing somewhere. And if it can't support her, it can't support me. And, I can't remember if I actually vocalized that to anyone or not, but I remember having that strange urge of just, I feel like I'm going to die. And, I guess you could say I'm not completely wrong, because definitely a part of me died when she did. I remember my husband was so desperate for me not to feel any pain in terms of having her. Like, he was like, he wanted me practically sedated, just put me under and take the baby out and call it a day. But I looked at him and said, honey, I have to give birth to her. I have to. There's nothing else that we can do.
Yeah.
Unless, it was a real emergency and they had to, take me and do C-section because my life was at risk or something. But, and then that's when it dawned on me. I was like, I have to give birth to my baby.
Yeah.
And it made me think. I was like, oh, I hung on to this little hope that, well, maybe when I give birth to her, maybe she'll come out crying and they were wrong. And so I still kind of held on to that hope. But during the whole time I was in the hospital, I did end up getting the epidural. That way I could, I guess, kind of focus on myself and the reality of everything going on. It totally went against my birth plan because I didn't want an epidural with her. But at that point, I was like, I don't know how long I'm going to be here. And I don't think say I'm there for 12 hours in labor. I don't know if I'd be able to deal with the pain of that and the anguish that I feel. So they did the epidural first, and then they started my Pitocin. And they started that at about, I want to say between 7 or 8 at that night. And so they started me on that. And I remember a lot of our friends and a lot of his coworkers were in the waiting room wanting to see us. Mm. My husband asked, do you want people to come in? Do you just not want them to come in? I can go out and see them. And it took me a minute to think about it. At first I was like, no, because my birth plan is I don't want anyone in this room. But then again, this isn't my conventional birth plan either. And so finally I said, go ahead and let them come in, because I know it'll be really good for my husband to have the support, for, me to maybe have it. And I was grateful that I let people come in and, pay their respects and everything, because, they came in and they were able to kind of help distract us just for a little bit. I remember the TV, like just turning that off for background noise, because I hated how quiet it was in that room. And you had to watch a thing about falling and something else. And I was more annoyed that I had to watch those before I could watch TV. So because I was so, I guess you could say more annoyed at the fact that I was so sad, I wanted something to lighten my mood. And so I put it on Spanish because I don't understand any of it. And my family looked at me and they were like, why is it on Spanish? And I said, because, well, one, when am I going to fall? And two, I just need some sort of noise right now that is just in the background. And plus, I thought it would be funny if it was on Spanish, because I don't know what they're saying. I remember putting on something on the TV, and I remember sitting there watching it, while the Pitocin was going. And I know they came and checked me, and they, I think I was at 4 centimeters. And they're like, we can break your water and it would go faster. And this was at about
want to say that was almost at like 1 or 2 in the morning.
Oh, okay.
And yeah, so between the time of like 8 o'clock, I had my anesthesia, and then, well, between 8 and 9, it took forever for them to get there. And then after that, they started the Pitocin fairly quickly. So at like 1 or 2 in the morning, that's when they broke my water. And I remember I was like, I just need to get a little sleep because I'm kind of exhausted, and I know I'm going to have to push soon. So I tried to sleep. I forced my husband to lay in the bed with me so I could. And I remember waking up and I could feel the contractions, but I couldn't move my legs. Like
Mhm.
I couldn't do anything, and I was like, well, that's a little odd because normally the epidural works for me. So then, yeah, they gave me a higher dose, and I remember the violent shivers that came with it. And they lasted, it felt like 45 minutes.
Mhm.
It lasted. And I was like, I looked at her, I was like, are you sure this is normal? She said, yeah, it's just what the medication does. And I was like, because this is miserable. I feel like I was put in an ice bath.
Yeah.
And finally it went away. And that's when I realized my contractions were stronger. I actually had to start breathing through them because it completely wore off, on my middle. And I couldn't move my legs.
Mhm.
And I started feeling the contractions. I was breathing through them. And then I was like, okay, so it's time to push. They brought the doctor in, and I remember, during the pushing and everything, I remember being able to feel myself push her out. And I remember thinking that, I was like, I know I'm in pain physically and emotionally right now, but I am very grateful that I'm able to feel myself do this because this is what I wanted for her. And I felt like it was one of the last things I could do for her is feel this and do it for her, because that was my whole plan all along. I remember when she finally came out, just like how quiet it was. And they put her immediately on my chest, and I just remember how quiet the room was, and then my husband's cries of anguish. And I remember telling her, I am so sorry. I said, I never wanted this to happen to you. And she was just so beautiful. She had her daddy's nose and my lips and his ears. And she was 6 pounds and 5 ounces and born at 4:02 a.m. And it was just so surreal that I was holding her on my chest. But it was also so surreal that she wasn't moving. And I remember my husband cut the cord, and I remember just looking at her and stroking her face. And then they asked me if they wanted me to have her cleaned, and I let them go and get her cleaned. And that was like the longest 20 minutes of my life waiting for her to come back. And when she came back out, she was wrapped in a swaddle, and they'd also put like a towel in there to help support her, because she was just so, really just so fragile. And I remember holding her and looking at her, and I remember kissing her forehead, and I can still remember how soft her skin was and how cold she was. And that, like, was probably the worst but best feeling. And I was just so grateful to have her in my arms, but I was so heartbroken that it was the first and last time. And I remember when I would hold her, I would, kind of rock her, and I would give her all the kisses, and I remember playing with her hands, and I remember looking at her toes, and I realized that she had my little baby toe.
And I was like, look, honey, she has my weird baby toe. He was like, poor thing. And, I handed her off to her daddy, and I loved being able to see her in his arms. I loved it because our friends, the December prior to us getting pregnant, had just had their baby girl. And I remember looking at him and I said, soon, honey, and being able to finally see that was such a beautiful moment. And, seeing him look at her, I was like, God, you guys are practically twins. um, I know he also played with her hands, and, I know he kind of, whispered things to her. And I remember when I held her again that I put her down and I re-swallowed her in another pink one, because I just didn't want the plain like white, blue, and red one, the hospital gives. I remember she's just laying there, and I remember just breaking down again because she was just so still. And it broke my heart because like I was expecting to have a baby that was a complete wiggle worm because she was so rambunctious in my tummy, you know. She was always moving the minute I sat down, and some days I'd be like, Vanessa, I really need you to kind of chill out. you know. I remember, switching her in my arms, and I remember getting her feet print done. The hospital staff really was wonderful all during this process. They were very sweet, and they were very respectful. I was able to hold her while they did her handprints and footprints. Um, and then, it was about, I want to say, almost 6 a.m. when my husband, looked at me and said, I think it's time to let her go. And I didn't want to. I wanted the cuddle cot, but I agreed with him because watching death take over her face was not making it easier.
Yeah.
And so I agreed. And, we let her go. And that was like the worst thing, is seeing her be taken by a nurse. And then I never saw her again. And I remember I did ask for pictures of her to be taken by a volunteer that came. And they did her photos. And when they moved me to the recovery room, one of the nurses said that she had the prettiest curly hair. And I remember thinking, I was like, I never took off her hat because I was too busy, kissing her face and touching her hands and touching her toes and everything, that I didn't think to do it. And so she got me 2 little tiny vials that have locks of her hair in them. And that made me really grateful to have. And they discharged us really as soon as possible. So I think by the time I was admitted to the hospital, it was around 5 o'clock. And then I left by noon the next day. And I remember sitting in the hospital room saying, I can't believe that I'm leaving this hospital with a piece of paper and not my baby. Because, you get this certificate that isn't a certificate of birth. It's just a certificate that she existed. And I was like, God, that's terrible.
Yeah.
Just a piece of paper saying your baby existed. I'm grateful I have the footprints and the memory box to bring home, but this is all I have. During the whole thing, I was very grateful for a lot of the friends that came and saw us, because one of my friends, Chris, had, brought me the essentials, everything I needed, because I left my hospital bag at home. And so I was never able to, dress her in the clothes I wanted to or anything. And I didn't want to bug anyone at 4 in the morning to bring me a hospital bag. And not to mention because, that my son is at the house and I don't want someone going in, waking him up. And, we have, because of the look of, because of death taking over her and, you could see it in her face and everything. We opted to just have the photos, and we didn't bring Harrison to meet her because we were just so I was concerned that he would be more afraid of her, and I didn't want him to be afraid because he was so excited for her. And
he was 4 at the time too, is that right?
Yeah. And death has never been brought up to my child before. I've had no reason to bring it up, and other than the casual, like, oh, unfortunately, this doggy died before you were born, so you never got a chance to meet her. And, he'd be kind of sad over that, but then he's 4, so he gets over it. But, sometimes I think about it and I really wish I had pictures of them together, but at the same time, I'm kind of glad because, like I said, I just didn't want to scare him with it.
Yeah.
And so, it's October 6th, and it's the day that's supposed to be the surprise party. And I told my husband about it, on our way home, but actually just before we left the hospital. And I was like, I told everyone the party was canceled. I just said due to a family emergency because I wasn't ready to admit the truth yet. And my husband was like, no, let's have everyone over, because Harrison is still expecting a party. So let's try and make everything as normal as possible for him. And I agreed. And, I'm really grateful that I had a house full of people to come home to.
Yeah.
I don't know what I would have done if I came home and the house was quiet. It was nice to, be able to kind of celebrate my husband's birthday, but it was just our friends helped us kind of, forget a little bit, and they did their best with trying to. I remember still being so drugged up that day because they had to give me, a high anxiety pill because I couldn't sleep. I had been well over 24 hours without sleep, and I was still coming off the epidural and everything. So when I got home, I remember, kind of being home, trying to, try to go back to normal. And I remember that I couldn't physically do it, and mentally. I had some baby stuff and everything throughout the house, like her pram and her baby book and things like that. And I was very grateful that my friends had actually moved that into her room and shut the door for when I first came home. I think it helped me, I remember coming home, and like I said, just the sheer fact of having everyone there was just it was so great because we thrive around our friends, and they're our biggest support group. And the fact that so many people wanted to be there was such a blessing. They wanted to be there for us. They didn't want to run away.
Yeah.
And I remember they had brought Harrison home. He came home a little bit after me because I can't remember what they had done. But he came home. I picked him up and I gave him the biggest hug ever. And I said, Mommy and Daddy need to talk to you. So we came into the bedroom, shut the door, and sat him down and said, honey, do you remember how Mommy had a baby in her tummy? I said, yeah. I said, well, Mommy had the baby, but unfortunately she died, so she couldn't come home with us. And I remember him saying, well, why? And I said, I don't know, honey. I really, really wish I did. I said, I wanted nothing more than to bring your sister home so you could meet her. And I was like, you're going to be the absolute best big brother ever. And so he, um, he cried. We all cried. We all hugged. And I told him, I said, it's okay to cry. It's okay to miss her. You want to talk about her? That's fine. And after that, everyone that came in, he came up and was like, our baby died. And that's how he refers to her. He doesn't call her Vanessa or his sister. He says, my baby died.
My baby died.
Yeah.
That's so sweet.
Vanessa is his baby. And everyone was very, very good with him, said, yes, unfortunately, I know, and I'm so sorry. And, but then he would go off and he would play and, be for a little bit, and then he would kind of remember. But I remember those, it was a week after I had her that we had the services, and the week in between, his mom, Alfonso's mom, stayed with us, and I was grateful she was there because, if I really feel like if we had an empty house, the grief process would have been tenfold.
Yeah.
It's already crappy. It's already the worst thing anyone can deal with. But I feel like we would have been put into almost like a mine shaft and like being squeezed to death.
Yeah.
Instead of, okay, I'm just kind of in a really big ditch now, but it's a big hill, but I can climb. So that's, kind of my best way to really describe it in terms of from when it happened to, I mean, even within the first month, I would have to say that whole week in between giving birth to her and her services was terrible because I had to do funeral arrangements with my husband, and I never thought I'd have to do that. We did opt to have her cremated, but there was something in what it was exactly, I'm not sure. My husband dealt with that because I couldn't form a sentence that what included Vanessa and death and anything that pertained to that. I couldn't just get it out of my mouth. I couldn't do it. But she was in the hospital for I think 3 or 4 days after I had left. And all I could think of was, she's in a cold fridge essentially. And she's without me. And I was like, why can't I just have her home until it's time? And I remember that when they finally said, she had been cremated, it was almost like a relief to know she wasn't being kept there anymore. But when we went to go get the urn, we had some friends drive us, and I remember when they handed me the urn, like I guess it still didn't register how small it was. It's a little heart. It fits in the palm of my hand, and I remember, just how heartbroken I was. I was like, this is the only way I get to bring my baby home.
So awful.
And so before we could bring her home, we brought her to the funeral home so they could set it up for the services. I think it was the next day. I think we picked her up on Saturday and had the services the next day. And I remember going into her room that day to put the memory box and everything like that in there because I didn't want anything to happen to it. And I remember standing in there and just thinking of all the days and hours I had spent getting her room ready, and how it was even a reality that I was standing there in the room without her. an empty crib, clothes that were never going to be worn. And I remember I didn't want anyone to go in the room. I didn't want anyone to go in there. I guess it's because that the room at that time symbolized my grief. And I didn't want people just walking into my grief without me being ready for it. So we had the services, and Alfonso and I both spoke for her. I was very grateful that I did that. I know some people, it's hard for them too, but I was like, I need to do something for her. I need to, speak and let everyone know my love for her. It's not, it's never going to go away. And I think the biggest thing that helped us in reaching out to our friends in terms of recovery and everything was telling them it's okay to bring up Vanessa to us. She's our daughter. We love her. We want you to love her. You bringing her name up isn't going to remind us that she's gone. Waking up every day reminds us already. So my mom ended up coming on October 19th, like she originally planned, because my due date was on the 21st. And I remember she came, and it was a really quick, like, hi and bye thing, because we were also going to a married life at a church with our friends. And we're like, okay, maybe just, I know it's only been 2, maybe 3 weeks since her death, but we can't sit in a hole because it's not good for either of us.
Yeah.
So we went to that married life, and I regretted going because they talked about the hardships of marriage, and one of the scenarios they used was, you're home all day with a crying infant, and the husband comes home and says, it's your turn. And I was like, I would love that.
Yeah.
I would love to just shove my baby off on my husband right now, and say, you go change your dirty diaper. And my husband agreed. He was like, yeah, I would love to be changing a dirty diaper. I'd love to hear baby scream right now. And I I remember, just thinking, like, I can't believe this is my reality. I still have those moments. I'll be driving, or I'll be reading a book, and all of a sudden it's like it really is PTSD. It hits you, you don't know what triggers it. It just comes, and you're like, I was pregnant and I had a baby, but the baby's gone. Did this even happen? Like, what is even going on right now? I have no grip on reality. And sometimes I feel like I still don't. So it's been, in terms of recovery, it's been up and down. It's been waves. Sometimes the waves are far apart, and sometimes it's a hurricane.
Mm-hmm.
And but yeah, it's, that's really my birth story and some of the recovery that we've been doing so far.
Oh, good. I did want to ask Kaitlyn, how did you guys come up with her name? I know you mentioned it earlier, that of the initials, but Vanessa, tell me about her name.
So I told my husband from the get-go, it was his job to decide the name.
Oh, okay.
I said, because I did have my son before I had met him, I said, I got to pick out his name. I want you to pick out her name. I was like, that is you, because guess what? I'm never going to be able to pick one because there are too many cute names out there. He already kind of had the names he really liked. He went from Vanessa, Victoria. I can't remember some of the other. I think some of them were like, I think one of them was Annalise or something like that. But he decided, he's like, I really like Vanessa. I said, okay, cool. Now we have a first name. Do you know what the middle name is going to be? And he said, I have no idea, but I want her initials to be VIP.
Just so great.
And I looked at him and I said, are you serious right now? He said, yeah, like, how cool is that? I mean, not everyone gets to do that, so why not? And I said, all right, that's fine. So I said, well, let's think of I names. And he didn't actually pick a middle name until she was actually born. I sent him, like, I think it was 2 weeks before, I sent him a list of like maybe 5 of them. I said, I would send more, but I don't want to overwhelm you. And when we were in the hospital, he looked at me and he said, what were some of those I names you said that you liked? And one of them was Eilis and the other one was Ivy. But I just felt like Ivy was the right one. And I said, well, the one I really liked was Ivy. He said, all right, Ivy it is. And so the nurse wrote it down on the certificate and everything. But that's really how her name came about.
I love it. That is such a fun story.
Yeah, it was something I was like, it's totally unique. All of our friends were super excited about it. They're like, that's so cool. Why didn't I think of that? Because I think the main motivation for him to do that is because we have friends who all of their names from them and their kids, they all start with the letter A.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And I know another family that all of their initials were MC, first and last name.
Oh, okay.
So
there's kind of a theme.
It's a fun theme, and I was like, okay, I see what you're going for. It's fun. So I think he wanted part of that because he looked at, I remember when he had noticed that about his friends, he looked at me. I was like, you need to change your name to start something with A.
Oh.
Like, it's not that simple. I was like, I'm never going to remember my name.
Yeah, exactly. You want me to do what?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so that's really where it came about. And I'm very grateful that he did that because even though she's not here, I mean, she really is our little VIP.
Yeah.
She is there to look over us. And I swear, I was never a person that was like, oh, ghosts are totally real. But I'm telling you, something about her energy is in this house because there have been times I'm sitting there, it's quiet, and something randomly falls like from the middle of the counter. And I was like, what just happened? And sometimes I feel like I hear little pitter patters of footsteps. And I'm like, this is a little crazy. I remember one day I said, Vanessa, stop it. And the other day I was in the bathroom. It was a couple weeks ago. And I could have swore I heard a little voice shout out, Mom. And I came out and no one was there. I was alone in the house. And I was like, this is just too weird. This needs to stop. So, but I like to think that if it is happening, that it's Vanessa just trying to be there for me, other than my mind playing tricks on me kind of thing,
Yeah. Yeah. A couple last questions. Tell me, did the doctors was there any sort of conclusion of what happened to Vanessa? Did they have any sort of clue about what
Not
caused?
really.
Really?
We opted to not do an autopsy. The main reason for that was because the doctor said, it's a 50-50 if we actually find out. And I think my husband and I agreed that, we're going to not do it, but also I didn't want her body to be cut up. I didn't want that to happen. And I also opted for the cremation because I couldn't bear to put her in the ground in my head, put her in the ground to rot. Like, I didn't want that either.
Yeah.
I wanted her close to me. I didn't want her in some plot somewhere. So they did a placenta one. We opted for that, the autopsy of the placenta. It did come back saying that it was small for her gestational age. And that there was because it was small, as in like the 10th percentile, but she was also rather small because both my husband and I are small people. She, my doctor was like, two, not exactly tall people. I don't expect a huge baby. So we weren't worried about that. It had like a 30% abruption, I guess, but it was inconclusive if that actually attributed to her death. we had genetics done on her, and those came back completely clean. Nothing was wrong. And when I asked the doctor about the placenta, she said, it's, really, it shouldn't have happened. And whether it's that or not, we don't know. She's like, I don't want to say it is, just only because we didn't do an autopsy. She's like, because I guess she's had patients whose little girls like had ruptured cysts, ovarian cysts, and that killed their baby. Yeah, like I guess it could happen to me or you anytime, but if it happens to a baby, it's fatal.
Yeah.
And so, but I don't regret not getting an autopsy on her. I just, it's just so, I don't know if having an answer would even make it any better.
Yeah. It's still just terrible. It's just still terrible.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not gonna bring her back. So I guess it doesn't make me angry or happy to not have an answer, but it doesn't make me sad to have an answer or not have an answer.
Yeah. Okay. And then last question, is there anything you want us to say about Vanessa that you want to remember about her?
I just really remember how active she was. I really like to think that she would have been my, sprightly, running around, making me want to pull my hair out child. But she would, I remember how peaceful she looked and how sweet she looked. And, it made me remember what I felt my calling is to just give love. And I keep trying to remember that. I remember her face and looking at it and just saying, I just want to give you all of the love that I possibly can. And, I definitely still try to. I try to do it in little ways, like whether it's just being there for friends more, try and do more activities with my son. I know that there are some things that I want to do in terms of keeping her memory alive. Exactly what it is, I haven't decided on it yet, but I did make a promise to finish school, finish strong, and get my career going, because that's what I would have done for her anyways. I would have completed school and I would have gotten this career and taken so many adventures with her, so that's my biggest thing, that I really want to remember about her, is that I feel like she could have possibly been like a little mini me, and she would have loved baking with me and going on adventures, probably would have loved horses too. And then she probably also would have been like her dad. She probably would have been a little bit techie, because he's all about the computers and video games. And, I think she would have just been a beautiful little mix of us.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Kaitlyn. Thank you for sharing Vanessa with us and our audience, and sharing your little VIP with us.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
So many thanks to Kaitlyn for being vulnerable and sharing your story of Vanessa with us. Head over to our website, stillapartofus.com, where you can find the show notes, including a full transcript of this interview and any resources that were mentioned, where you can sign up for our short and helpful email newsletter, where you can learn how you can become a patron and support the work it takes to produce this show for just a few dollars a month, and lastly, where you can find out how to get in touch with us if you want to share your child's story on the show. The show is produced and edited by Winter and Lee Red. Thanks to Josh Woodward for letting us use his song, Flickering Flame. You can find him at joshwoodward.com. Lastly, subscribe to this podcast and share it with a friend that might need it, and tell them to subscribe. Why? Because people need to know that even though our babies are no longer with us, they're still a part of us.
Always remember that you are absolutely unique, just like everyone else. Margaret Mead.